Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar on Council's experiences of using ESD Performance Tools on actual projects. I'm Lucy Carey-Reid, I'm Business Leader at Ironbark Sustainability and also Head of the Sydney office, and I'll be facilitating today's session. Panellists today are Sarah Patterson from Lake Macquarie City Council, Ian Adams from Knox City Council, and Carl Hopley from Wollongong City Council. Now, before I hand over to Sarah, who's our first speaker today, I just want to introduce you to the range of environmental performance tools that councils have at their disposal for assessing and prescribing the sustainability of their own buildings. And I know when I first started working at councils and for councils about 10 years ago, it took me a while to get to know all the tools that are out there and also work out what's most appropriate for the certain sized buildings at council and types of projects. And here's how I think about it. I think about it in terms of large facilities like your admin centres and your leisure centres, and then your smaller facilities. And then I also think about it in terms of what kind of building project it is, so a building design or an existing building. In the design phase, here are some of the tools that are available to ensure that the design of new and major refurbs is sustainable. And then for existing larger buildings, there's a range of different external tools out there. And then for your smaller facilities, there's a range of external or internal tools that can be used as well. So today the panellists are going to be talking about Green Staff for existing buildings and the Sustainable Design Scorecard. There's nothing stopping us though in the discussion time to expanding our conversation to cover some of the other tools out there. It'd be great to hear about your experiences. So I'll just hand over to Sarah Patterson. Thanks, Sarah. If you can unmute yourself,
Thanks.
Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I'll just show my screen. Okay, yeah, thanks for asking me to speak today, Lucy. I was a bit apprehensive at first, to be honest, because I feel like we're very, we are at the very start of our journey, if you like, looking at what tools we use. So my presentation is going to be more so about sharing the experience so far, and I actually feel like I've got more questions than answers, but it might help others skip to those questions rather than having to do all the background that we've done so far. So here we go. Just to give you a bit of background, we developed a better building strategy that was adopted by council in October this year, so it's relatively new. The aim of this strategy was to consolidate actions that council was already taking and processes that we have, and anything that relates to sustainable design and construction and maintenance of community buildings, and really capture it in the one document and get all the departments that work in that area on the same page, if you like, about what our aims were as an organisation. So council has 325 buildings that are currently covered by the strategy, and these are childcare facilities, boarding club amenity buildings, libraries, cultural buildings like our art gallery, multi-purpose centres, sporting and aquatic centres, public amenities, senior service facilities and community halls. And pending on this first year of the Better Building Strategy, we'll be looking at council-owned facilities, so that also includes the facilities that we have that we currently lease out to private organisations or commercial leases, really. So the strategy includes minor works criteria, like lighting has to have greater efficiency than 130 lumens per watt, but it also identifies the types of works that we think should be looking at using rating tools. And so, Lucy, you've already mentioned a few of those. Ours in this strategy in particular looks at Green Star and the Sustainable Design Scorecard. So the way the strategy came about was that there was a lot of discussions across departments and reviews of other councils' documents. It basically resulted in a list of actions, like an action plan over the next couple of years, which we got buy-in from other council departments that they agreed that these were good actions to take. That's just a snapshot of it there. So it really provides a framework for cross-departmental commitment to formalising sustainability in our existing processes for designing and upgrading buildings. So, like I said before, it's only the beginning. We've completed 2 reviews of current facility designs using the Sustainable Design Scorecard, and we've found challenges in being able to fully apply that tool. And I'll be talking about those challenges coming up. And also, disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I'm just sharing experience of what we've come across so far, in the hope that, you know, as one council, we might be able to share and compare information with other councils and hopefully help each other through the process, I guess. Yeah, and again, probably more questions than answers. So the first facility, I'm actually going to only talk in depth about the first facility, but this facility is the Alan Davis Amenities Building. It's a new build. It was over $1 million, but under that $4 million that Lucy showed on her screen before. So basically what I did is looked at what they'd proposed in the design. I looked at the Sustainable Design Scorecard and looked at where the gaps were, what I didn't have information on. I went to our city design department and asked what they usually specified. There were 158 pages worth of specifications to go through on this design, and I got lost in a lot of it. I had to ask, you know, where was information on this, where was information on that, and yeah, city design were really helpful in helping me with that. So I'll just go through the categories of the Sustainable Design Scorecard tool and how the amenity building stacked up to give you a snapshot of why it can be difficult to apply this tool. And, you know, hopefully this gets discussion going afterwards. But so of the energy category, we found that 42% of the points weren't applicable in the case of this design. We didn't know what it meant by going over 10% of the table it referenced in section J, and I've since gotten advice on this, and I can talk about that a bit later on. But given the following, we weren't confident on how applicable that criteria would be, and that criteria carries the largest points, that first criteria about going over 10%. So this building doesn't actually have HVAC. Our sporting amenity buildings don't. It has no glazing, no windows. It's, as I've discovered from our design department, it's crim safe mesh over openings. For a lot of the sporting amenity facilities, car park ventilation wasn't relevant. On-site cogeneration was not appropriate. Vertical transport like lifts was not appropriate or applicable. Electrical submetering could be done, but there wasn't multiple occupants. And because they're quite small users, it's probably you know, you could do it for the extra couple of points, but it's probably not the best facility you could do it on. The transport and water categories, we could meet the points, but there were a few things that, you know, caught our attention about whether we were actually using the tool correctly. So we didn't have employees as such to provide bicycle racks for, because amenity buildings don't actually have permanent occupants, and to have a set amount of bicycle racks, that must be included in a brief to community planning ahead of the design. The showers and change rooms are inherent to the nature of the building. It's a sporting amenity facility, so you've got lots of sports teams getting showered and changed there. So, you know, do you give points anyway? I don't know. separation of facilities. There's no staff toilets, again, because there's no staff there, but they are separate due to the nature of the building, so you could award points anyway. Fields are either side of the amenities block. Would that count towards reduction runoffs? Irrigation tanks, would they count as alternative water supply? Because often we use irrigation tanks for alternative water supply. And points for centralised irrigation system is something that we thought we could potentially award as an innovation point, if you like, because we're currently encouraging groups to hook up to a centralised irrigation system so that we can monitor any leaks. Waste, we could meet the points, but 6 out of the 20 points we didn't feel were applicable because there was no existing structure to recycle waste from. Again, no on-site grinding of demolition waste because there was no demolition. Design for disassembly and adaptable design were things that should have been identified in the brief. So there was nowhere in the technical specifications that this could have been identified, really. It should have happened in the brief. And this really brought home to us that there are quite a few criteria that we would need to work with community planning, which is a department that orders these designs to happen, to make sure that the things that are important to us are captured at the brief stage, and that there's a case for them to do that. In the materials category, we couldn't meet it. The default timber used is plantation pine, which you get points for, but FSC timber is not specified, and the response was that they wanted to know more about the perceived cost differential. So that's work that we're going to be doing next. They wanted more information on extender content or geopolymer concrete before they would be prepared to specify it in designs. And the last 4 criteria in that category we felt were a bit ill-defined. They basically say floors, external cladding, or wall construction are sustainable. You get different, you can take different sustainability criteria from different materials. So we want to do some more work to see what we actually think is sustainable in that area. In that category, 40% of points are for concrete, the use of concrete and how you use extender content or geopolymer concrete. So we found it problematic if there was no concrete in the design. For example, some of our upgrades, there are no concrete. We did this exercise with a Spears Point Library upgrade, and there was no concrete in that design. So the materials, you start to become constrained in what you can get points for. Indoor environmental quality, we could meet it due to already specifying low VOC for a lot of things, but our design department said they would not specify adhesive-free carpet tiles because they perceived it as a maintenance issue. And points for external view maximised was not really appropriate with the use of the building, and that a lot of it is change rooms. So the next category and the last category is ESD excellence. We could meet that, but we found that 16 of the points were also not applicable. There were a couple of points where we weren't really sure. Building user guides we do quite informally. We have a central intranet, if you like, for the community groups that run our facilities, which has some generic user guides for the types of facilities they do run. So this is done informally. Would we get points for that? I'm not quite sure. Post-occupancy is quite informal too, in that our community planning department is the central point of contact, and they will get complaints if the building's not running as the volunteers and the community groups expect. So yeah, we didn't award points for that. Innovative HVAC wasn't possible. No recycling of water from fire systems testing was possible, and we found that the criteria for what constitutes habitat and net gain to natural environment was a bit loose. And if you plant gardens and there weren't gardens there before, do you get points? So these are all things that we're trying to, I guess, look to get more answers on so that we can feel more comfortable using this tool. The summary is from using the tool to date. And as I mentioned, we used it on a library interior upgrade as well, where we also found we couldn't apply quite a few categories just to the nature of the upgrade that was proposed. So from those two cases, what we've concluded so far is that this tool is really only appropriate for heated and cooled facilities. So you really need to, I guess, consider that. And in the case of our building stock, we have 109 club amenities which aren't heated or cooled, 135 public amenity buildings which aren't heated or cooled, and we're not sure of the implication to the 32 community halls. So I think a lot of the criteria is geared towards, quite a few criteria is geared towards the building being permanently occupied. There's limited application for partial refurbishments on council's average building size. And I think part of that is having to do with the materials category being dominated by concrete, which, we need to look at further. But we have found that we use the tool to guide feedback to projects. So we went through the tool and picked and chose relevant criteria that we thought that could be applied in the case of this project. But we found it was really hard to actually apply all categories, or even 5 out of 7 categories. So we need to do further work on providing the case for items to be included in brief before it gets to city design, because this exercise was really a gap analysis of what the type of design that we currently do. If we don't include things in the brief, we can't expect city design to have included that in their design. We need to do further work on providing the case for geopolymer and extender concrete. We need to do further work on understanding the implications of 10% improvement on Section J, and if this is even viable. With non-heated and cooled buildings, I don't think it is. So next, we've identified a number of sites for audit and retrofits, and we're integrating these actions with a scheduled upgrade works plan that assets management has. We're looking to use one of these sites to do some SDS training, and we'll have to scope out that site is suitable. And we're looking to do that training with us and city design staff. We've developed a waste space calculator, which is just one of the things we've been doing to help in brief inclusions. The calculator basically helps community planning identify how much space they should allow for recycling and general waste, because we sometimes find that there's not enough space when it gets to the design. If you don't have that space, it can be problematic later on when the recycling is actually operational. Gathering more info on what other councils are doing and how they are using or adapting tool use. So that's basically where we're up to, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. And certainly during the question and discussion time, it'd be great to hear from some of the other councils that have used SDS and just hear them reflect on their experience of what they did, for example, when they came up with areas of a building design where some of the SDS criteria weren't applicable. So similar to your heating and cooling system and open windows. So it'd be great to hear from them a bit later. I'm just going to hand over to Ian Adams, who's the Sustainable Design Officer at Knox City Council, And Ian Adams is also one of the key authors of the Sustainable Design Scorecard, so he'll certainly be able to provide value today. Okay, I'll just unmute Ian.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk briefly. I think I've got 10 minutes. So do stop me if I go over too long. I just wanted to talk a little bit about NOx. I'm resident sustainability engineer there. I'm 1 day a week on secondment and have been for about 5 years. So we've had some, I suppose, implementation of these tools. To tell the story, I'll just quickly go through, I guess, the process that we originally had. So back in 2009, we did a stakeholder consultation project where we tried to, I guess, mediate and communicate and create a common language between the environment group and their goals and the capital works group who wanted to get on and build buildings. Essentially, we ran a series of workshops where we got stakeholder input and we really looked at essentially the process of building a capital works project. So how does a building actually get built, who designs it, who specifies it, and where some of the problems for delivering sustainability actually sit within council. Because everybody seemed to have the right intentions, but at the end of the day, what was getting delivered did not really meet the expectations around sustainability. So as part of that, we did a bit of a tool analysis just to really make sure that the right tool was specified for the right job. And what we did find is that the SDS possibly is a bit big for a lot of council projects. If you're talking kinders and bus stops, quite often there are a lot of not applicable categories. So there was, I suppose, some customization of checklists just to deal with the bus stops and the public lighting and the pools that really couldn't be easily processed by Green Star or the SDS. However, for a few of the larger projects, we found that SDS was applicable. So we did develop a policy. It's went through a first draft, and it has since been reviewed and readopted by councils. And really, the policy identifies the process that sustainability is delivered within council, who's responsible, what sort of timelines, and specifies the appropriate tool from day one so that each project is, I guess, using the right tool for the job. More specifically, the policy requires people to demonstrate a business case how they'll achieve council sustainability targets, which is really important to get the funding correct, right up early on when the bids are being done. So we make sure that the budgets include ESD. We have some specific standards for water and energy and waste and stormwater. And we require that essentially Capital Works gets some help or does an internal referral, and that our intentions actually make it through to project documentation so that the design engineers, the architect, the builder all knows what we actually want. And to help all this, we developed a life cycle costing tool that I guess helps us justify the expenses and the cash flow implications. So I guess our first round of projects that we ran this policy over was a soccer change room, so a sports facility quite similar to the last case study, and also a basketball facility. So the good news first was in the soccer pavilion we did use the SDS. We used it as a design review prompt, so we actually met with the design team and just went through the items, not necessarily as a solid in and out type cool tool, but really to facilitate discussion. We managed to get some efficient systems, solar panels, good passive design, cover off all the basics. And essentially, and we did a design review internally before it went to tender, so we just also went through the project documentation to make sure it contained the sustainability items. And we were quite happy with the results in the environment sustainability group, and the project went off quite smoothly. There were some issues, namely that the utility connected the building up as a very high demand building, so their first summer demand charges were a bit over the top, but that got sorted out once the utility realised that this building didn't use much power. So the next story was a basketball project which was going on about the same time, where we didn't apply sustainable design to. It's probably, every council's probably have one of these projects where this project started off as a basketball court, then someone wrote a bid and to federal funding, I believe, and it turned into a basketball pavilion, and then with more successful bid writing it actually turned into a stadium. So the total budget was, I believe, about $20 million. However, at the end of the day, it did become a bit underfunded. So cost pressures, time pressures, various other community pressures meant that ESD was essentially removed as part of value management to save costs, and I think about $500,000 worth of sustainability features were removed, which was good because it got the project over the line. However, the peak demand on this building was quite astronomical. It was a fairly poorly insulated enclosed building, and because it was a stadium with a very high occupancy figure, the air conditioning system had to be enormous. So an enormous air conditioning system running flat out in a poorly performing building meant that when the soccer club moved in, they received a $100,000 plus electricity bill, which I believe at the time was more than their annual budget for the club, which caused a little bit of, shall we say, discontent with the building. And we have gone through the building just to make sure there is no major problems, but at the end of the day, even with our logging in place, we know that it's very hard to use this building without the air conditioning turned on because of the design of the building, and the air conditioning is an extremely energy intensive system. So at the end of the day, I guess they're just two different projects, one where we feel we had a good outcome, and one where we didn't have quite so good an outcome. So we've had a few more projects go through, but we've got an upcoming childcare centre, so we'll be looking to apply SDS or perhaps some more custom toolkits. And in terms of the custom toolkits, we are just looking at complementary type systems for a capital works checklist such as SDS or Green Star, which will allow us to do some of this more non-applicable stuff. We're also looking at a sustainable infrastructure checklist for paths and all the projects the council, parks, drainage, lighting, all the council's stuff that isn't buildings, project management tool for the actual capital works people to keep track of all this ESD stuff, something that will allow us to internally audit a tender stage design as well, just so that we can make sure that what was promised is being delivered in the actual project documentation. And of course we're using the life cycle costing tool. So essentially that's what I wanted to talk about, Lucy, so I can probably hand that back and answer any questions towards the end.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, next I'm handing over to Carl Hopley. Dr. Carl Hopley is the Environmental Planner at Wollongong City Council, and he's going to be talking about using Green Star on Council's administration building. Thanks very much, Carl.
No worries, Lucy. Thank you for having me. It's just going to run through very quickly about the Green Star Performance Pilot. The building was constructed in the 1980s, so close enough to a 30-year-old building now. 13 stories, a total area of 1,600, just over 1,600 metres, and there's a 9-level car park on the back. You'll see a term there which is ROPS, which is regularly occupied primary spaces. That's a Green Star specific rating and deals with the areas within the building that are regularly occupied by people. So since about 2004, there's been a lot of work undertaken to do with energy and water efficiencies. And as you can see down the bottom, the building has improved its water performance by 85% over the minimum performer, as established using the Green Star Performance Tool, and energy by 54.6%. So they're quite significant efficiency improvements within the building. That's just a very quick list of some of the upgrades. When I guess the webinar's uploaded, you can have a bit more of a detailed look and fire me an email with any questions about what was actually undertaken, and the same being for the water efficiency actions. Now, I guess, why did we go down this path? We wanted to rate the building. All these upgrades have been occurring over a number of years, and both the facility manager and myself, we really didn't have a clue where we stood in regards to performance in the broader world. We attempted a NABERS energy and water rating, but because of, I guess, the operational parameters of the building, including its operating hours, the car park, and lots of other factors, we achieved a NABERS energy and water rating of 0 stars. And with that, we're basically told we couldn't rate your building. So we started looking for an alternate tool, and in 2013 we found Green Star Performance. So it's been a 12-month journey, or a 12-month plus journey, I should say, nearly 2 years now. So we started the beta testing, which is that primary development testing of the tool, back in February 2013. And we really commenced work on our submission in July 2014. We submitted in September 2014 a total of 56 points worth of credits, and we were awarded 23 points. Don't be disheartened by that if you're thinking about going down the Green Star. It's quite common that you get a low number approved first round, particularly in a pilot phase. When we met with the assessors, they indicated that the 52 comments we received were about a third of the comments that went back to the Green Building Council on what they needed to change within the tool. So we persisted. We had another 3 credits points awarded during the query process. Our round 2 submission is finalised, all bar 1 credit. We're waiting on an executive decision, and we'll be likely to submitting between 63 points and 78 points pending that decision, which means it'll be either a 5 or 6 star rating outcome. So originally we targeted 3 stars because we didn't actually know what to expect. As we went through it, we discovered that that was quite an estimation for the building's performance. So as I said, now we're looking at that 5 to 6 rating depending on the report to executive. So to explain the experience, I like to use the analogy of a roller coaster. Lots of highs, lots of twists, and lots of lows. So I'll start off with all the highs. Finally, there was a tool that we could actually start working with. It was better than what was out there in the marketplace as it existed. And it actually made David, who's the facility manager, and myself realise how well managed the building is, based on the fact that we were essentially getting 63 points in the credit tool without having to write new documents or prepare any change practices really within the building. So the information has been fed into the Sustainable Buildings Policy and Strategy and Rating tool, which I'm in the process of developing, and I'll show you a sneak peek of the rating tool at the end. Bit of process improvement, and there was a couple of other energy actions identified through the process. Lots of twists. throughout the credit, throughout the tool, one of the issues we had, there were a lot of credits where we actually met the credit, but we didn't meet it in the way the Green Building Council specified. Now, for those of you who don't know the Green Building Council processes, you can lodge what's called a credit interpretation request, which is a CIR, and that says, look, we achieved the intent of the credit, however, we do it in a different way. Are you okay with this? Yes or no? And then the Green Building Council make a determination and will specify the evidence that you have to provide to support your claim. I think we're up to about 47 credit interpretation requests at this stage, which is quite a lot. One of the other issues we had was being the assessment guinea pig, and it came down to what the assessors interpreted the tool was asking for versus what the Green Building Council's intent was versus what our interpretation of the intent of the credit was. So it was a big learning curve for all involved. We were the first organisation in Australia to submit, so it was the first time anyone had attempted to assess a building against the Green Star Performance Tool. So the lows, you do it but you don't. This is a little bit different. So there's the waste to landfill credit as an example. It's very much focused on the diversion of waste. In the upfront credit, it doesn't actually reward you for avoidance of waste. You have to go and submit an innovation challenge to say, look, we've reduced our waste by X%. The basic monitoring credit is another classic example. That credit was a draft version was created because of our project that is essentially saying, okay, in a basic credit as we're asking for, is a manual meter read scenario. However, we're okay with someone who has installed electronic monitoring. So there's tweaks to the tool going on with regards to that. Needs more flexibility to accommodate the different mechanisms that organisations use to achieve outcomes. In a design and as-built tool, you can be quite prescriptive because everyone's going to have a scope of work. Everyone's going to have a schedule of drawings. Everything is very, I guess, easy to specify. However, in a performance or operational environment, you can't be that specific. You need that flexibility. The online platform was developed to try and speed up the submission process and make it easier from an assessment end and a participant's end. However, there's not a lot of smarts in the tool, in the online platform at this stage, and the GBCA recognise that and are working to improve that at their end. Again, the assessment process was really frustrating, and it reflected the guinea pig nature of it in saying that some of the feedback we received was very ambiguous. Comments like HVAC manual is not complete. And we're going, well, what do we do with that? Why is it not complete? There was no application of materiality principles throughout the document. So one of the credits was looking at emissions, and we made a note saying generator on site has used X number of litres of fuel over, it was about 318 litres of fuel over the past 2 years. So the actual emissions factor from a materiality perspective was negligible. And that caused issues from the assessor's perspective, so we had to address that as part of round 2. Now, addressing a lot of these lows, the feedback, the Green Building Council has held a range of workshops where they've gone through all of these issues with project teams. So you've got GPTs, GrowCons, MERVAC, the big property developers in the room. We all sat around and discussed the challenges, and the GBCA are looking to try a new model for how the tool will be delivered and assessed, which Wollongong Council is possibly going to participate in once we finally complete our existing rating. So if you do go down the path, do it now while it's in pilot phase, because CIRs, TCs and all the rest of it are free. Plus the Green Building Council are looking for more case studies to improve the team. They really want the feedback. Now, one of the key things that I found useful was the development of a tool to help us to track where we're targeting and all the rest of it. So this is an example, just a screenshot of part of the tool. If anyone's interested in the tool, I'm happy to email it to Lucy for distribution. And when we set our target, as you saw, we set a 3-star target. We didn't know where we were going to fall out. So don't be afraid to set a low target. GPT for Bond Street in Melbourne, which is a carbon neutral building, they set a 3-star target as well. So don't be ashamed by setting that mediocre target. And if you hit that, great. If you exceed that, well done. Patience is another, I guess, critical element to it. There was numerous times where I wanted to take my bat and ball and walk away from it because it became all too hard. But working with the Green Building Council, you work through most of the problems. You need to put it into context that it is a pilot process and it can be frustrating. So to save that, it's all about engaging in the dialogue. You need to refrain your sanity through that engagement. It helps the GBCA improve the tool and help you to get a better outcome. So the big question marks, will we recertify after initial certification? So recertification means every 3 years, you have to go through the complete tool to re-establish your rating. However, on an annual basis, you are required to provide energy and water data, which may or may not affect your overall rating. The recertification process is still being developed, and our decision as to recertification will hinge on what that will look like. If we were required to undertake the same type of assessment as we did to achieve the initial certification, it may not occur. Now, the next part, would we do it again at other sites? Again, time will tell, and that's why we're interested in looking at the revised model of the tool. Now, one of the comments I made was, why did we do it? We started to develop, I guess, our own toolkit to establish the performance of our buildings. So it's based on a gap analysis and some energy and water performance and site-specific indicators. So I'm just going to flick it open so you can have a bit of a sneak peek at where it is. And it just lives in Excel, so it's nice and easy to work with. I'm just going to go back to the main details page. So this is the page where all your generic information is entered into. And this bit down the bottom is, I guess, where your results will come out. So there's a gap analysis, which goes through a series of questions, and you indicate yes, no, non-compliant, not assessed, not applicable for each of those, and it will develop a, I guess, a rating of where you're compliant, where you're not. In addition to that, the tool, sorry, let's just skip back up to the top. There's also tabs for water data and electricity data. So it's all about establishing a baseline for a KPI and then generating a performance score up here, which is essentially looking at a series of values. If you improve the performance, the average performance across of your consumption in this case, by X%, you'll receive a score of between 1 and 5. I'm looking at revising that, and I'm probably going to increase it to 1 to 20. So I guess the story for us is Green Building Council's performance tool. It's a work in progress. I'd encourage people to give it a go if they have bigger buildings. The more input that councils have into the tool's development, the more flexible and usable it will be for us moving forward as a significant player within, I guess, the property sector. All right, thank you, Lucy.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. Now, I have had some questions filter through on the questions box. To all you others, feel free to add some questions. Carl, I'm going to keep your screen on while I ask you a couple of questions from Whittlesea Council on the Green Star tool. So this is from Karen Rosenberg. How does the Green Star Performance tool calculate the energy and water ratings? And how does this differ to neighbours?
Okay, for both energy and water, there's, I guess, 4 pathways that you can choose. If you have a neighbours rating for a building, if you bear with me, I'll actually go into the performance tool. And I can show you directly. And essentially the performance methodology that we used was looking at the baseline, historic baseline data set, which we entered in 5 years worth of historical data. And then from there, actually I don't even need to go there, sorry. Making it more complicated than it really needs to be. And then from that perspective in the calculator, it will give you a response. Greenhouse gas emissions calculator. Sorry, this is just going to load up. So you go through all of these tabs once you identify which option you use, and you're going to populate data in the response. So I'm just flicking to the points table. So if you have a neighbours rating already for energy, this one is, you can see here the various neighbours rating and the equivalency in points. There's also 1B and 1C options, which are, there's a federal government data set on building performance and sort of kilowatts per metre squared of different building types. But what we found is we couldn't get a comparative number for the administration building. So on the advice of the Green Building Council, that process was ruled out. The other option there, the 1C option, is to do with gathering a group of peers. So if you've got 3 sports stadiums which are of equivalent size, you can compare to them. And option 2 is the option we took, which is the average baseline performance methodology.
Carl, we've got 10 minutes left of our webinar.
Yep.
So it'd be great to wrap up on this question and get on to some more.
Done.
Great, thanks, Carl. Okay, now I'll just take us back to my screen.
Yep.
There are some other questions for Carl, but I will just ask a question to Ian Adams first. So Ian, this question is from Peter Vun from Ku-ring-gai Council. He says, can you describe what the life cycle costing tool covers? And my question to you also is, are you able to share this with other councils?
Yes, if you want to switch over to my screen, I'll take you through it quickly. Okay, so essentially life cycle costing is a way to get some more clarity on the whole argument of increasing capital cost to save operational cost by looking at total costs over, say, 5 or 15 or even 25 years, and just asking questions. Is it, I suppose, cheaper to spend a little bit more now and have a reduced cost down the track? So there's a lot of sustainability things that you don't do just for financial reasons, such as, say, healthy paints in a childcare centre, but there are some things that you do just to, I suppose, save bills, such as lighting and different types of energy efficiency in your air conditioning systems, for example. So this tool allows you to put in a project and details and just list some initiatives that you're thinking of doing. So for example here is upgrading to LED downlights. So let's say, well, these days there's very little incremental cost, but if you put in $1,000, say, extra for your project, and then you can work out that you're not going to need an electrician to come and replace high halogen bulbs. So you can say maybe it'll save $1,000 over 15 years. You can work out your energy savings perhaps. Put in this data and it'll start working out the totals for you. So if you add up all these figures, it gives you that capital cost there. It'll add up all the different energy savings, for example. You put in your assumptions about energy cost. That's probably a bit higher these days. It hasn't been touched for, let's say 2.5 if you've got it on a good tariff. So you put in your assumptions, including escalation costs, so how much you think energy and water will go up each year. And what it will do is create a cash flow graph to help your business case for all these sustainability initiatives. And it'll probably look something like this, where you say for, say, an extra $215,000 investment, you get a payback where this crosses, so after about 4 years, and after 15 years you're likely to be saving, say, upwards of $1 million, and including this annual outgoings. So this is cumulative, this is annual. So it just allows you to, I suppose, paint a more detailed picture of your potential cash flows, and also speak in a language that finance might understand a bit better, things like net present value and internal rate of return, which is more commonly used with the accountants. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ian. Now, if it doesn't, we can put you guys in touch. Ian, I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's in relation to what Sarah Patterson from Lake Macquarie talked about with, she used the Sustainable Design Scorecard on a building that doesn't have heating and cooling systems. And she found that it meant that a lot of the performance criteria in SDS just wasn't applicable. Do you have any advice for councils using something like SDS where some of the criteria aren't applicable?
Yes, SDS is still a useful tool, but it is hard to meet the specific scores. So in that case, it needs to be more something used to facilitate discussion. And say, if you have no, what was a good example? No permanent staff, and therefore permanent staff lockers and visiting credits are not really applicable. Well, you might just go, well, what are the transport options? Are there things that we can do to make it more likely that people will be using sustainable transport options for this building? Do we perhaps need a bike cage for people who want to leave a bike there, but it's not a permanent option? So it becomes more, for those smaller buildings and not applicable buildings, it becomes more of a guide for discussion than necessarily a specific benchmark, which is not necessarily ideal, but we have found that sports pavilions in particular, even in Green Star, can be very hard to I suppose, fit a square peg in a round hole. They are very specific buildings.
Sure, thanks, Ian. And just following up on that, Ironbark have been using the Sustainable Design Scorecard on a number of council buildings. Councils have been hiring us to help them do it, and we've also been training council staff on how to use it. So just keep in mind that there are external consultants around that can either help you if you're piloting this tool or trialling a tool that can help you with the assessment and can certainly train staff on how to use it. What we generally advise councils for a building where not all criteria is applicable is that, as Ian said, just use it as a discussion tool, a design review prompt, but you can also use the score system still just by making some of the, just making sure that the design doesn't have to comply to certain components. Now, I'll just move on to some other questions. This is for Sarah from Peter Von at Karingai. Peter says, I take it from your last slide that you feel that the SDS tool is suitable for refurbishment and or upgrade projects.
Sorry, that it wasn't suitable?
That it is suitable is what his question says.
I think we would have to look, I think it would be suitable for things like a multi-purpose centre where we've got, say we've got a library, we've got a childcare centre, we've got like community rooms, it's all heated and cooled. We have permanent staff, even though it might only be a small office. So that, if what he's referring to is the where next slide, the facilities that we're looking at doing an audit of and a review and doing some training in the tool would be that type of facility. But in terms of sports amenity buildings and refurbishments of the scale that we looked at with Spears Point Library, which is one of our main libraries, we would have to look at it a lot more closely, and I think what we would end up doing is just picking the criteria that we think appropriate, and because what happens in our process is design send us their plans and ask for comment. So we would use the Sustainable Design Scorecard tool as a guide for then providing relevant comments back, given the criteria that's applicable, and then we would just disregard all the criteria that's not. And then on the flip side of that is, I think it is useful for upgrades from the perspective of looking at what we need to go to community planning with and ask, are these the types of things that you could include in a brief? But of course we'd have to go armed with the information of why do we want to include it in a brief, what's the business case for it, things like those life cycle things. But obviously stuff like bike racks, we'll just say, well, for all these types of facilities, we're trying to drive up bicycle use. There might not be a life cycle cost, but this is the aim as an organisation. So from now on, these types of facilities, we want X bicycle racks. Sorry, that was a bit of a waffling answer, but I hope it answers your question.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. We've just got another couple of questions. I just want to pose mine, and then I'll pose the others. I'll just unmute all the panelists and see if they've got any comment, and then if anyone else has any questions or statements to make, please pipe up. What about the replacement of existing building equipment? So I'm not talking about new buildings or major refurbs. What about when at your council a hot water system breaks at, say, a childcare centre? How does your council make sure that the equipment being replaced is sustainable and suitable for that site? The reason I choose hot water as an example is that so often I'll audit a building, it'll have a massive hot water storage system, and they're only using hot water to wash their hands.
I'll jump in. Essentially, it normally happens like for like, which if that's not going to happen by default, it takes, I suppose, some awareness and some engagement with between capital works, maintenance, and environment departments and the subcontractors. Particularly hot water systems, someone's just going to put in a phone call and get a hot water system within 24 hours and sort out the details of specs and bills and things later. So there really needs to be almost a targeted approach to those sort of replacements. Air conditioning is the same.
Thanks. Sarah or Carl?
Yeah, Lucy, we've been lucky in getting some grants in the past for things like hot water upgrades, and so what we would do is go to our assets department and say, look, what have you got on your capital replacement work list at the moment, things that are coming up that you need to replace anyway. So we would work with them to identify those sites and install the hot water systems that we get grants for, like solar or heat pumps where solar's not appropriate, on those facilities. And through that process, we've got a better relationship. So often, if something happens, they might come to us and ask for some input anyway now, which is great.
Great. Okay, thanks, Sarah.
From our end, it's a little bit ad hoc. I'm actually being seconded up to the building maintenance an asset management team with the view of, I guess, embedding some processes. One of our biggest challenges is we have a team of 4 people who are trying to coordinate the maintenance of over 750 buildings. So it's quite challenging to deal with, and it's generally very much ad hoc.
Okay, thanks, guys. Now, just for the final questions, we've got some for you, Carl, and then some for the panel. So the 2 to you, Carl, how much did it cost to be involved in the piloting program? And also, do you plan to use the Green Star design on your new building?
Okay, in terms of the cost, it's dependent on the size of the building, the upfront fee. I think for our building it was about $10,000 to enrol the project. In a pilot phase, the CIRs are free, but in a live version, they're about $400 plus GST each CIR. So it would be quite expensive if we had to do this process outside of the pilot phase. But as I said in the presentation, the Green Building Council are looking to resolve that issue. And as for the second question regarding will we use it on new buildings, the design and as-built tool, I've proposed in my strategy that it would be used where it could be applied. So some of you may be aware, but the Green Building Council are releasing a new version of the design tool, which is called Design and As-Built. It becomes one tool rather than 2. And it's designed to be a one tool fits all buildings. So it could be as challenging as the one tool fits all performance tool. Time will tell. All
right, fabulous. We do have some remaining questions. Thanks, everyone, but we won't have time to cover them. I'll make sure we can email you some answers instead. So I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone for attending today, in particular to our panelists, Sarah, Ian and Carl. A recording will be made available on our website, together with other information on sustainable building management. We've done a few other webinars over the past year or so and have some documents that provide information on what other councils have been doing to maintain their building equipment, make sure they're sustainable, and maintain their buildings themselves to make sure they're sustainable. So thanks again. Good luck making your building sustainable, and goodbye.